In today's video, I'm going to talk about why it hurts when you write and what you can actually do to either reduce or eliminate the pain. Okay, you do have a choice, and we're going to get into that. So let's get started. All right, so why does it hurt when you write? If you look online, the experts will basically tell you, they'll all tell you the same thing. It comes down to two things: improper technique and overuse. So what they're saying is that you're writing the wrong way, you're writing too much, or both. Okay. Now, I assume if you come to this video, you can't just write less, or you don't want to write less. You enjoy writing, you need to write for your job, for school, for whatever. So you can't solve your problem just by writing less. That's not a solution for you. So what we need to do in this video today is talk about a technique that will allow you to write more or write as much as you need to with the least amount of pain. Okay. Now, I know a technique that I teach here on my channel that will allow you to write for hours and hours with absolutely no pain. Okay. Probably sounds too good to be true, and it is, and we'll get into that. But I'm going to share this technique with you in this video because it will perfectly illustrate why you experience pain when you write. And that's the first place we need to go to figure out how you can write with less pain. All right, so the secret to 100% pain-free writing is to write with your arm, okay? And this works because when you write with your arm, you're not using your fingers to write. You're not moving your fingers around like this. Those are staying stationary while you use your arm to move the pen, okay? So you're using the muscles in your upper arm, your shoulder, and your back to move the pen, okay? And these muscles are so much bigger and stronger, and they have a great range of motion compared to, the movement that's required to write, that they don't fatigue. There's just no pain. There's nothing. When you write, you can do this all day. I know because I write this way, and I can write for easily 2 hours without any pain in my arm or my hand. I'm going to have pain in my eyes and just mentally feel exhausted before my arm causes me any problems, okay? Now, I said before, just a moment ago, that this is too good to be true, and it is, and we'll get into why that is. But before we do, I want to talk about the way that everybody else writes. So the way that everybody, including the way I learned to write, which is with your fingers. All right, so when we write with our fingers, we use the smaller muscles below the elbow. So here, forearm, wrist, hand, fingers, to both grip and stabilize the pen, to hold it, stabilize the writing, and to actually move the pen to make the strokes, okay? And as far as I can tell, it's not the muscles that are moving the pen that typically start to hurt first. It's the muscles that are used to grip and stabilize the pen, okay? And then there's also some pain that comes on later just from the repetitive motion of all of these moving parts. You just go like this back and forth. It's not like your muscles aren't getting tired, but that repetitive motion starts to create pain, inflammation. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but that's my experience writing with my fingers, okay? So, is the solution to stop writing with your fingers and learn to write with your arm? No, it's not. I mean, that will work, but learning to write with your arm is pretty challenging. It took me like a year to be able just to write a decent, legible script with my arm, practicing 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day, like every day for a year. It might not take you that long. You might be able to learn it faster, but it's still something that's going to take like 6 months, probably at least. And then if you actually want to write as good as you're able to write with your fingers, depending on how well you can write, that might take you another 1 to 3 years. Okay. So it's not an easy skill to learn. It's a fun skill to learn. I teach it here on my channel. I encourage people to learn it if they want to, but it's not something I'm going to ask you to learn, and just somebody that just wants to write with less pain. Okay. So the practical solution that we're going to focus on in this video today is to learn to write with the least amount of grip pressure possible. Okay. If you can learn to do that, then you're going to eliminate all of that pain that you get from holding the pen too tightly, which, as far as I can tell, is the majority of the pain that most people get while they're writing, okay? So This isn't going to be easy. I'm going to warn you. It's hard to learn to write with a new grip. It's a habit that you formed, but it's a lot easier than learning to write with your arm. So, and I just don't think there's really no other choice. Okay, there's a few other tips and tricks and things that I will share at the end of the video that will maybe help, but you have to make a fundamental change in the way you write, or you're not going to get any kind of significant reduction in that pain when you write. Okay, so let's dive into it. Let's get into exactly how you can learn to write with less grip pressure, and that'll allow you to write with a lot less pain. All right, so to get started, we want to use a ballpoint pen. And if you've done any research about learning to write with less pain, a lot of people say don't use ballpoint pens. And that is true. You don't want to use a ballpoint pen. But for learning how to write with less grip pressure, this is going to be a helpful tool, because a ballpoint pen writes just fine with very minimal pressure on the page. You barely need to touch this pen to the page to get ink to flow out of it, but it does produce a very light line, and the harder you press, the darker that line gets. So most people, when they write with a ballpoint pen, they just instinctively press harder on the page because they want to produce that nice, dark, visible line. But for what we're doing right now, we want to learn to write with less grip pressure and less pressure on the page right now. So we want a tool that will show us if we are pressing down hard on the page or whether we are not. And the ballpoint pen is perfect for that, because it will show you if you're getting a light line out of this pen, you're not pressing down hard on the page. And if that line starts to get dark, then you're starting to press harder on the page. Okay, so this is going to be a useful tool as we learn to write with less grip pressure. All right, so you have a pen. I have a Bic Crystal cheap bold pen. I like the bold, or maybe a medium. I wouldn't use a fine one. You want to have that variation in the line thickness if you're pressing down harder or lighter. Get some line paper, any kind will do, and we can get started. And before we get started, let's just remember that what we're trying to do here is gain conscious control of how tight we are gripping the pen. Okay, we want to be able to sit down. The end goal here is to sit down and write and be able to say, all right, I'm going to write with the least amount of grip pressure possible, or I'm going to write with a little bit of grip pressure or a lot of grip pressure. And you would choose that based on the result you want to achieve. So if you want to write your best possible handwriting, you'll need to use more grip pressure. But know that if you write for too long, you're going to have a lot of pain. And if you want to, on the other hand, if you want to write for endurance and you have a long writing session ahead of you, you're taking notes in a meeting, at a class, doing a lot of writing, then all right, I'm going to use my light grip pressure. My handwriting might suffer a little bit, but I'm going to be able to write without any pain or with a lot less pain. Okay? So that's our goal. We want to have conscious control over that. And while we're learning, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to feel strange, and your handwriting is going to suffer. So just have some forgiveness for yourself. Don't worry about what the handwriting looks like right now, and it'll get there with enough time and enough practice. All right, let's start with these drills. Just moving the pen up and down in a straight line, and just moving to the right as we go up and down, and just do as many strokes as you can till you feel like you need to move your hand, and then pick it up and move it over to the right, and keep doing more of these, and just do groups of these, and do them at a slant, that whatever slant you feel comfortable, that kind of just matches your natural handwriting. Okay, and the whole time that you're doing this, we want to be producing as light of a line on the page as we can with our ballpoint pen, and we want to be holding the pen as lightly as you can. Now, don't fool yourself. You can hold a ballpoint pen tightly and put a light line down on the page. Okay, that's very possible. So your primary focus is holding the pen lightly, and you want to have a light line on the page to match. Okay, and just do this and play around with it. Make the strokes as tall as you can, make them as small as you can. Really dive deep into how it feels in your hand as you're moving the pen. How uncomfortable does it feel? What muscles are moving the pen up and down? Think about all this stuff deeply. That's my only way for me to do stuff like this and have it not be absolutely completely boring. Because it's not going to work. You don't want to put on music or TV at this stage in the background. That's just going to distract you, and it's going to make the time that you spend not nearly as effective as it could be. So leave the music off, leave the TV off, leave the podcast off or the audiobook, and let's just focus on writing. As you get better, later on, you might be able to bring that stuff back in. After you filled up a quarter of a page or so with the more vertical up and down strokes, let's switch to horizontal strokes. And just let these strokes follow the natural curve and geometry of your hand. So they're going to have a little bit of curve, overturn, as we call it. Just let it do that. And just like with the up down strokes, play around with it, do it at different sizes, see how much space you can fill up before you have to move your hand. And then also at the same time, think about how it's feeling in your fingers, in your hand, in your arm as you do these drills. All right, really focus on that and just kind of learn what it feels like to move the pen in this direction without holding it tightly. This last drill that we're going to do is just a series of loops. And just like with the other drills, have fun with it. You can do these in both directions. Figure out which one's maybe harder, easier for you. And just kind of feel your hand going through these different motions and how the different muscles engage as you get into certain parts of the loop. Really just dive into it, experiment, play around with it, and just keep focusing on holding that pen super lightly as you make these strokes. And again, make them as neat as you can. I mean, it's going to be a little harder because you don't have as much control as you're used to, but try to space things out evenly and just keep your page nice and neat and just keep focusing on holding that pen as light as you can. All right, so we've done each of the 3 drills and each of them filled up about a quarter of a page. That leaves us the last quarter of the page. And with this last quarter, you're just free to play around and actually write some letters and some words in your own handwriting, okay? Realize it's not going to look as good as your normal handwriting does when you're gripping the pen tightly, but we just want to start practicing, even at this early stage, writing some letters and words using the lightest grip pressure you possibly can. Okay, that is, again, still the overall focus here. We're not worried about the results. We're not worried how our handwriting looks right now. If it looks terrible, have faith that it's going to get better as you practice this over the next days and maybe weeks, okay? And we're just shooting for like a 10 to 15 minute session here. We don't need to spend more time than that. Nobody has time for that. If you can do 10 minutes a day for a few weeks, I think you'll get the hang of this eventually, and you'll be able to start writing with lighter grip pressure. And then you'll just be able to bring this practice to your regular writing sessions when you're actually doing practical real world writing. You'll be able to say, all right, I'm going to take notes today, and I'm going to just be mindful of writing with light grip pressure. Okay, so that's the drill, that's the exercise. This is what you can do every day to learn to write with less grip pressure, with very minimal grip pressure, and eliminate a ton of the pain that you get while writing. All right, so I've given you a plan here, a practice plan that you can use to really transform your writing and make it much less painful. Maybe even eliminate, if you don't do a lot of writing, it might even just eliminate pain from your writing completely. And it's the most important thing. Learning to write with less grip pressure is the most important thing you can do. But there are a few other things that I need to mention that might help as well and add a little additional, or maybe take away a little more pain, allow you to write a little bit longer as well. So the first one is to write smaller and simpler. The idea here is that when you write, you're making movements with these muscles. And if you can reduce or eliminate some of the movements you need to make to write, then you're going to be able to write for longer until you start to experience pain. Okay? It's just common sense. So writing smaller makes these movements smaller, and you're just not moving your hand as much. You're not using as much of the range of motion of these muscles and these joints. So you're just going to be able to write a little bit longer if you're writing smaller. And then if you can simplify your script, your handwriting in any way, reducing strokes, eliminating strokes, removing extraneous strokes from your script, those are just other movements that you don't have to make, which is going to allow you to write longer with less pain as well. Okay, the next thing is to use a pen with a bigger body or barrel. A lot of people find it uncomfortable to hold a pen that's skinny like this Bic Crystal. You just think about if you just put your fingers together like this, that's kind of like a straining position. Even though you're not gripping anything tightly, if you're just lightly putting these fingers together, it just kind of feels uncomfortable. And holding your hand like this is uncomfortable. So the idea with a bigger pen is that you can separate these fingers further away into a more natural resting position, and that reduces some of the strain on the muscles. And that does seem to work, and some people have a lot of success with that. Again, I don't think it's going to just like dramatically change anything for you by itself, but combined with the technique that we talked about today, holding the pen lightly, I think it could make a difference. The other thing that can help is to use a pen where the ink flows freely from the pen. So a ballpoint pen is not really one of those pens. A ballpoint pen does write freely, but it produces a very light line when you don't press on the page hard. So it's not a great candidate. A fountain pen, a rollerball, gel pen, those are great pens to use because you just touch them to the page and the ink comes out. So you don't need to be pushing down on the page, and sometimes that pushing down on the page can often cause you to grip the pen tighter, which is what we don't want. All right, and then the last thing you can try also is just holding the pen up higher on the barrel, okay? So just holding it further away from the tip. This is going to give you a little less control, but it's going to allow you to make bigger movements with the tip of the pen with smaller movements in your hand. So again, you're just going with this idea that the less you move your muscles and your joints and all the mechanics of your hand, the less pain you're going to have. And just holding the pen up higher on the barrel gives you a little more range of motion with the tip of the pen while using less movements in the hand. All right, so what if you've learned to write with a light grip? You've tried all the little tricks and tips, and it's still hurting when you write. Okay, so I think a lot of the pain for most people around writing is because they're gripping the pen too tightly. But there's also pain that you get from just moving, just the repetitive motion of writing, okay? It can start to hurt kind of the joints in your hand and your wrists and your fingers. And for certain types of people, that pain is more prominent and it's more of a problem. And if that pain is just so much that it's bothering you and it's causing you to not want to continue writing, then there's really not a whole lot you can do. I don't know of any solutions. I mean, now we're talking about medical issues, maybe with arthritis, inflammation, those types of things kind of becoming a problem for you. And I don't really have a solution for you except to learn to write with your arm. If you do that, then you're not moving any of these joints in your hand and you're not going to create any inflammation there. And you're just using these big muscles in your arm to move the pen and you won't have any pain. So that is the kind of 100% solution, is to learn to write with your arm. And that might be what you have to do to get writing to a pain-free or a tolerable pain experience. But I think that's kind of a small percentage of people out there that are going to have that much pain where they just have to learn to write with their arm if they want to write without pain. Okay, for most of you, doing what I've shown you in the video, I think is going to help dramatically and get you to a point where writing is comfortable again. All right, that's all I have today. I hope this helps people out there. You know, I'm not an expert. I haven't done scientific studies on what works and what doesn't. This is just based on my own experiences, what makes sense, and what I've had success with personally. I'd love to hear any comments that you have, any ideas, any tips you have for people to write with less pain, what's worked for you. Put that in the comments. This is kind of a topic that I think that has been kind of largely neglected by the professionals in recent years, just because people are writing less and it's not a problem that's affecting as many people, or they don't see it as a problem that's going to be affecting as many people as technology becomes more and more a part of our lives, digital technology. But obviously there's still a lot of us out here that are writing and using writing and love to write and find it a lot of benefits over the technology for all kinds of practical uses. So it's kind of up to us in a way to figure out how we can solve this problem. And hopefully this video has helped in some way. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.